and welcome back to Higher Hertz. My name is Justin Leppert, your online cello teacher, and today I want to talk about how to practice. So a lot of people will talk about how to practice, or that you should practice, but it's harder to know exactly if you're doing it right. I remember when I was younger, there have been times that I wanted to practice more, and then by the time that I had, played through some scales and played through my piece a couple of times, i.e. about 20 minutes into it, I was a little bit at a loss as to how to even continue. So hopefully in this video we can elucidate or clarify some of the ways that we practice and start by talking about what a good practice structure looks like. So practicing, you want to start with some sort of warm-up, whatever that is. For a while for me it was something very technical like open C string, listening for the resonance, that sort of thing. That was like very back in the beginning. Nowadays for me it's free improv for the first 20 or so minutes of practice, but you want to have something that kind of gets you going. And when you're young, it's really important to practice scales like a lot, because those are going to be the foundation of everything you do. So if you're really shooting for the moon with your cello playing, it's best to try to commit to an hour of scales. And this can come in a lot of different forms. If you're really trying to actually play in tune, this can easily take up an hour and be one of the more exciting even ways of practicing the cello, because when you're practicing repertoire, sometimes it's hard to have the feeling every time. But with scales, you don't have to worry about that so much. It's more just the sound. At least that was true for me. Everybody's a little bit different. Then you'll want to move into etude practice and then spend the last half of your practice. So if you're shooting for 4 hours, that's 2 hours. But if you're just able to practice 40 minutes a day, then the last 20 minutes a day is repertoire. So let's start by talking about how you can practice scales, how you can make scales better and make it in a way that doesn't feel quite so bad. When you're practicing scales, the most important thing that you can do is not be overly forgiving of yourself. Remember, this is practice. This isn't performance. You don't have to worry about whether you got it good enough. It's your time to work on just making it better. So if you hear a note that isn't how you wanted it to be, start over. And if you spend your whole practice session really only getting to the first few notes because you're being that critical, that's totally fine. You're gonna be able to get beyond that as time progresses. But being that fastidious about it's really gonna help you. And if you really are feeling stuck because you can't even get past those first few notes, or you get used to the first octave, but then it's harder as you continue, just switch up which octave you practice starting on and just do those few notes. You can break this down endless different ways. But if you're practicing, say, C major, you're just starting, it's a very basic C major scale, just start maybe, one note per bow. Oh, so then that note was out of tune. So you do all the work you normally do with the note that's out of tune. You try to remember what it was. You try to hit it where it was again, and then try to find the real note. So what I'm doing there is I'm testing against an open string. So assuming you've tuned your strings, you can use the open strings as a reference. If I'm trying to find the low D, I can use the open D to check. And one thing you'll notice is that I'm able to make the pitch go up without moving my finger. So one thing that you should be careful of with the cello is if you want to give a real attack to the note, because you're pulling the string more, it actually increases tension on the string, actually makes the pitch of the note higher. So you might want to see how I brought my finger down and then that made it better if you're doing it that way. But you want to try again. Okay, good, we got that one. Oh, there was another one. So what happened there? Okay, well, let's try to find that same note again. Okay, now maybe you're unsure. Is that sharp? What exactly happened there? All right, well, how can you test the note is in tune? Well, again, if you've tuned your strings, what note is that? F? So the two notes that you're going to be able to choose from are the open D string again, because that's going to be a minor 6 with the F, or the open A string, because that's going to be the major third of F. So if that's the note that we had found, so maybe that's not making it extra clear for you. Well, this is where this practice is really, really important, because if going at this speed, it can be hard to know where the note is in tune or not. Imagine if you never did this sort of work and you were only in rehearsal at school or going to a lesson, and so sometimes you're going to run into a roadblock where you try some different things and you're really not sure if it's helping or not. You really just don't know whether the note is sharp or flat. And experiment with it. Maybe what you have to do is just try again. Let's try again. And we're going to pick a direction. So we're either going to put our finger down sharper or flatter from where it was before. Oh, okay. And then by going much flatter, it seemed a little more obvious, perhaps, to scoot up into the note. Obviously, some of these mistakes that I'm making are purposes for demonstration, but hopefully what I'm showing is what actually happens when you're practicing. And I think it's easier to hit a note flat and come up into it than it is to play sharp and then play around with it. So that can be a tip to find it. So once we've been able to find something that kind of sounds right relative to the note before it, maybe you just go back and forth a few times. This is not a time to forget bowings. Still want to have a good sound. All right, let's try this again. All right, so maybe we feel like we got that note, but we're a little unsure. Let's test it against the open C string. It sounds pretty good. Now, to my ear, too, when I came into that note, this is a finesse thing, it kind of hit a tiny bit sharp and settled. So while that's maybe not a huge issue, it's something that I would work on. And so let's see if I can get that better. And it relates to the problem earlier of how the bow hits the string. So in order to fix it, I not only wanted to hit my finger in like exactly the right place right from the beginning, but I also didn't want to overpower the string, because we're going to change the pitch if we do that. So different things to be aware of, and you'll discover these things slowly as you practice. So when you get to practicing really high on the cello, these things come in double, where you'll have shifts here and you got to really learn those, and sometimes it takes years before you're consistently getting a certain shift. That's fine. That's why it's important to practice the scales on their own. When we practice an etude literally means study, to study. Étudier in French is the verb to study. So an etude is something in between scales and repertoire, where it's technical exercises in song or piece form. Now, I'm pretty sure I've talked about etudes before. We're going to be talking about a few on this channel here quite soon. But for right now, there's a little bit of a gap. But what we can do is we can go to arpeggios, and we can try to challenge ourselves to perhaps play arpeggios that go only up on the G. Like, let's say we want to do a G major arpeggio. Well, there's the standard fingering, or let's just try going up on the G string. This is going to be us getting more awareness with the instrument. All right, so that G was a little flat, right? We'll try to hit 2 flat. I think that was about right, because that would be in tune. And this one's easy to know because we can test against the harmonic. Okay, so this is why it's important to practice coming down. So we were able to get up, but not back down. So what we might do is we might just start from the top. So might have to find the note a little bit, but see? So the problem is overshifting. And probably because try to overcompensate. As we go higher, we have to play narrower, so overcompensation. And that was getting the note again. Lead the shift with the elbow. And ultimately, you want to not just be getting your fingers in the right place, but understand how the bow works. So this is something that I didn't play perfectly the first time. It was a little more representative of things that I might practice. And ultimately, what you want to do is make sure that just, for the most part, you're able to just play it right out of the gate. So let's see whether this little bit of practice, discovering a hole coming back down the arpeggio, or at least coming back down quickly, we're able to do it now. So there's still some weird things that happen. I think because when you're high up, you're kind of choking the string. So there's a little bit of theory about it, but if we keep that in mind, we're going to be extra precise with our contact point, where the bow is on the string. And remember, though you might not practice this particular technique, this is more meant to show you how you would practice down here because of where I am in the cello. So I'm practicing something that I actually would need to practice. And we can just do a little better. My thumb hit there a little bit. One final thing I want to try to do is be completely precise that as I go up, I'm compensating by moving the bow up so that proportionally the bow is in the same part of the string. And I think we're going to be able to get a nice, clean arpeggio. Can you shut up? Stop! Okay, so let's move on to talk about rep. Now, we haven't talked about a lot of repertoire on this channel, but we have taught you guys how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So again, when we're practicing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we're practicing any piece, we want to make sure that we know what the notes are and bowing's confidently enough that we can be working on how they're supposed to sound. So we're playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. All right, so there's a great thing. What happens if you get a little squeak? Well, if you get a little squeak on a note, it has something to do with the timing between the hands. So in my case, it's because I put my finger down earlier than the bow. Okay? It comes out a little differently every time. It's part of the beauty of these sort of things. But what we're going to want to make sure, if we put that finger down, we're going from open string to, closed string, I guess, where you have the finger down instead of the string being able to ring freely. So what that means is a commensurate sort of adjustment in the way that the bow plays. Namely, that we're going to be a little more focused with the bow, a little bit more intentional with the bow sound. Okay, so now that note is better, but now I hear relative to that note that the A string is a little bit whiny. And so for a lot of reasons, eventually a lot of cellists choose to not use open strings hardly ever because they do sound a little bit more naturally unstable, whiny. You can't put vibrato on them, at least without kind of doing some sort of half measure down there. All right, so how are we going to make that sound better? Well, one thing we can do is we can just isolate A strings for a moment and just practice those two notes that we have. Okay, because that's taking the change out of the equation. Now those sound pretty nice. Now what can we do to get them in context well? Well, one thing we can do is we can break the phrase up. So we're gonna go, pause. So already there's a little difference there. Maybe that difference can be accounted for the fact that I didn't fully adjust. So let's take even more time in between the notes. I think we can be even more matched. Great. And so what I really wanted to make sure is that I was playing the string the exact same way. So it's going to be hard to magnify what this is, but if I'm picturing not just the angle of the arm, but the way the bow comes into the string, this angle basically, I want that angle relative to the A string. Now let's see if we can do them faster. And a new thing that happens that I hear is that on the final open strings, there's too much oomph, and it causes a little bit of a crackle in the articulation. So. It happened both down bows. So what's that telling me? Well, it's telling me that my down bows are imprecise. So we're going to use a new practice technique. We're going to use a practice technique where every note we're moving in advance to the position we'll need to play the next note in, except we're not going to play it just yet. So we'll go like. All right, now let's see what that did just without doing anything else. A lot more even, a lot more smooth. I love that technique because what it does is it forces you to be moving in real time, to be making the changes in real time, but it gives you the time to think about exactly what you're doing. And then that's training your muscle memory for when you actually come back to play it. Okay? So far we've talked about kind of how to practice scales and basically this technique of kind of starting over if you hear something. Also, hopefully I've shown you some different ways of breaking down, analyzing where the sound problems are coming from. It's either going to be because of the balance of the left hand or maybe the contact point of the right. Over time, it'll be easier to decide or to suss out what's going on. Until then, a teacher can help. But what you want to be able to do in any case is spend time with it to be able to break it down in different ways and be able to find ways of getting your hands to do the right thing in any context, and then make that context be more and more playing the song and then having it to be sound right. But you can break it down, say like, I'm just going to play this one A string, and then you can start trying to build it back. And in the building it back, it gets a little bit harder, but you can sort of build the pyramid, so to speak. You know, you're practicing everything in isolation, and by the end, you're just practicing the piece, everything together. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys, breaking down just a little bit of the process of practicing, a little bit of a peek into the types of things that I would do, playing scales and this little bit of piece. When you have a practice session, you want to be able to work out these little problems, and then when you give a performance, it's hopefully more ready to go. Once again, my name's Justin Leppard, and this has been a production with Higher Hertz. Stay subscribed below for more lesson videos, for more things like this. To see me play, you can find me as the Vagabond Cellist, and we'll see you guys in the next video here. Thanks again for watching.